NDEAM. We have National Disability Employment Awareness Month every October. And so we have representatives from MSC and Novant Health talking today about their employee resource group and business resource groups. For those who don't know what those are basically an opportunity for employees to connect with like-minded people and help foster an environment of employee diversity and inclusion. So they're going to talk about, we have Sarah Lafferty and Shannon Swiger, and they're going to be talking about what their company does and how they're involved in their employee resource group. A few things before we get started. We will have some time at the end for questions, so feel free to put some in the chat or save them towards the end. You can either do the chat or raise your hand at the end and we'll call on you, and you can unmute yourself at that point. So I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to our panelists, and they're going to introduce themselves and their role at their company and how they got involved in their ERG.
Hi, good morning, everyone. My name is Shannon Swiger, and I'm with Novant Health. I'm really excited to be with you all today. At Novant Health, I have a couple roles. One is that I'm Director of Internal Communication, which is part of corporate communications and marketing. And my other kind of hat that I wear, which I'm super passionate about, is working with the BRG. So we have a Persons with Disabilities Business Resource Group, and I am a co-leader of that group.
Great. Hey everyone, my name is Sarah Lafferty. I work at MSC, which might not be a name that you're familiar with. We're an industrial wholesaler, so think of us as like an Amazon to businesses. So we keep factories such as Mercedes, Kraft Mac and Cheese, Coca-Cola up and running. So that's what MSC does. What I do at MSC is I'm a diversity, equity, and inclusion specialist. So I get to work on all things that kind of fall under that DEI umbrella, which includes our resource groups, which we call inclusion circles. So that's kind of what I do at MSC. It is really fun and it is really rewarding to get to touch all of our groups.
Great, thank you guys so much for introducing yourselves. So I first would just love to hear a little bit more about your employee resource group and the activities that are kind of involved in the meetings and your personal involvement in the group. So how maybe you got involved in that.
Yeah, I can take this one first if that works for you, Shannon. So MSC, we currently have 6 resource groups, inclusion circles launched. So we have WIN, which is Women's Inclusion Network, BIG, which is our Black inclusion group. We have Pride, Veterans, OLA, which is our Hispanic organization for leadership and advancement. And lastly, ABLE, which is focused on individuals with disabilities. So of those 6 groups, they obviously focus on very different things, but they all share how in which they measure goals, and that is with Dr. Rodriguez's 4C model. So they measure goals focused on the culture they're creating, how they're investing in their community, the career advancements for people who identify with that specific group, as well as commerce, which is how they're connected to the business and helping us move forward within the markets that we're currently in and maybe untapped markets. So that is kind of a framework for some of the activities they're doing, such as volunteering in their communities for Juneteenth, walking in some of the Relay for Life and breast cancer awareness things during October, doing different things like that. They're also launching some mentorship programs, all focused on those different specific groups for that career aspect. But they're all doing really different things, but within the same framework that kind of helps them keep in line. And of course, my involvement is helping to manage the success of the groups, supporting them in any way that they need it.
And just to add to that, so at Novant Health, we have 14 business resource groups. So many of the same kind of dimensions of diversity represented that Sarah already touched upon. We also have a Native American BRG. We have one that's called Coexist, which is all about different religions and faith traditions. We also have one called Engaging White Men. That's for, just like it sounds like, white men and kind of understanding their role in the diversity inclusion space and what they can do. We also have a few others, but the group that I work most closely with is persons with disabilities. And so we're a group, we have about 40 members, and they range from employees who have a disability to those who are caregivers of people with disabilities. And I'm included in that group. I have a daughter who has disabilities. And then we have others who are just kind of allies who are part of the group as well. And so we have monthly meetings where we get together. It's on Zoom because our company is kind of spread out across the state of North Carolina. So that's kind of the best way for our members to connect. And we cover anything from just time for people to kind of share their personal experiences and things that they're going through, to updates on our projects. Every year we complete a strategic plan, and we focus on, we have like a goal around health equity. We have a goal, we do a lot around like recruitment and retaining our team members who have disabilities. And then digital accessibility has been another area of focus for us. So we kind of come together, and we have a lot of smaller work groups that connect in between, but we provide updates to the larger group. And then we also, try to do some fun activities. Like next week for Disability Employment Awareness Month, we're going to be watching a documentary. And then next month, November is National Caregivers Month. So we're going to have a speaker come from the Exceptional Children's Assistance Center to come and talk, put on a webinar for parents of children with disabilities. So kind of it ranges our activities month to month, but all of our activities are really kind of based on our strategic plan, which is built based in part on the Disability Equality Index. And I don't know if you all are familiar with the Disability Equality Index, but it's kind of a national benchmarking tool that helps companies understand how they're doing in the disability inclusion space, and best practices. So that kind of helps us figure out like where we need to focus our time and attention.
Awesome. Thank you guys so much for sharing those activities that you guys are involved in, and how you're involved in your BRGs. I would love to know how your group has enhanced your company's culture centered around disability specifically, and help to increase the awareness inclusion that is involved in each of your companies.
So I can take this one first. So one of the biggest things is the survey that I just mentioned. We kind of advocated our BRG and said to some of our leaders and diversity, inclusion, and equity, and others, like, hey, we really need to be a part of this survey to understand how we can do better. And so kind of the outcome of that survey is the companies that do really well are considered best places to work for disability inclusion. So that was a really big honor 3 years ago. We took it for the first time and we got like 80%. And then since then we've gotten 100%. So that just has helped a lot with, it's just kind of a stamp of approval for people who are looking for jobs to say, okay, like this is a place where disability inclusion is really prioritized. But I'd say, we do a lot of different events like webinars. Like one event that was really popular earlier this year is we had like a company-wide kind of like town hall on disability inclusion. And we had some of the members of our BRG share their experiences of living with a disability and working with a disability, both like apparent and non-apparent disabilities. And so I think that we had a really great response from that. And a lot of people ended up joining the BRG because of that. Another thing that we're doing right now is an in-person event that is essentially like a simulation event. And so we're having it in each of our big markets, but we're working with Department of Health and Human Services, the Division of Blind and Hard of Hearing and Deaf. And they come in and they actually have different stations where you can simulate the experience of being deaf or hard of hearing or blind or low vision and some of the challenges that people may face. And so that's another way people could come and have that experience, and it just helps them better understand, we're a healthcare organization, we're taking care of patients, many of whom may have disabilities, and it helps them better understand and appreciate the ways that they need to improve their communication and working with people. So those are just kind of a couple examples, storytelling. We do a whole lot around telling stories, and that's really helped raise awareness. And then people will join our BRG when they see those stories too.
Awesome, Shannon. I love that you touched on the disability index. It's such a great tool for companies to use. So that's exciting that Novant is using that. For us, I think a big thing, at least from my perspective, is that I think a lot of companies, and MSC was kind of one of these, that we talked about bringing your whole self to work and how we wanted all of that. But we weren't necessarily doing a great job of creating spaces for you to bring your whole self to work in terms of sharing what's going on in your life, in terms of talking about the hard things in the news, or just like your team getting to know, like, who are you, like, how are you raised, that affects how you show up to our customers, or what kind of traditions are important to you and your family that make you you, and that makes MSC so great, because our differences are what make us so great. And so for me, I think it was really important that we intentionally carve out spaces in which people can come and share every element of who they are, that they don't have to kind of polish up or feel like they're presenting, but instead they're just coming and sharing their life experiences and what has made them their individual selves. And so that has been a big piece of our inclusion circle resource groups. And that's been really cool to see. Like, there's been so many meetings I join and people go from laughing to crying together to laughing again. And that sense of belonging, I think, is just something that we'll never fully understand how much our company is changing in terms of culture, but those glimpses are what really keep me going and really excite me. In terms of measurement, we also do an annual engagement survey. In our most recent survey, we had the highest engagement scores we've ever had, and diversity, equity, inclusion was a top driver of that. And so that was really cool to share with some of the leaders, the chairs and co-chairs of our groups, to say, like, hey, these conversations you're having, like, they are making a difference here, and people feel this sense of belonging and this inclusion like they haven't felt before. And this was also shown, we did a top workplace survey in both of our headquarters locations. So one's in Davidson, North Carolina, the other's on Long Island in New York. And one of our top performers there was a sense of inclusion and belonging. And so those measurements and kind of touch points we get from these surveys are a really great way to show that inclusion and that sense of belonging that we're creating through these uncomfortable conversations. But it really is what keeps our kind of people going and excited about what they're doing.
Great, thank you guys so much. And Sarah, you talk about carving out time, so that kind of leads into our next question is, what does it look like with your, does your organization give you the adequate time during work hours to be part of these organizations, and how does that work with your regular responsibilities at your job?
Yeah, I can start with this one. My answer will be different because my regular job is this, which I absolutely love. But I can tell you from behind the scenes of what we're doing is that we're really targeting middle managers. I think our leadership team from middle managers up do a great job of saying, like, hey, get involved. But if they're not involved and they're not modeling the importance of taking an hour out of their day to attend one of these meetings, or setting aside time to be in a leadership role, I don't think it speaks as loudly as if when they are doing that. So for us, we're really targeting those middle managers and making sure that they, one, understand how to do that, and two, are actively doing that so that they can model that behavior as opposed to just saying it. And so we're also really focused on how do we then incorporate our hourly associates, so people who are typically on the phone, people who are typically on our customer fulfillment center floor, maybe like accountants, other people that fall in that hourly space. How do we make sure that they know that they can be included and that their managers are equipped to have conversations surrounding their productivity and the importance of these groups and involvement there as well. So that's a little behind the scenes of what we're doing. I'm lucky enough that I get to go to all of them, and that is my job. And so I absolutely love that and see the value super clearly.
Yeah, I'm jealous of you, Sarah. I wish this was like kind of my full-time job in this space, because this work is so impactful and so powerful. So I would say, similar to what Sarah said, yes, I mean, generally there's like really strong support, I think. I think as an organization, I mean, we've had BRGs now for quite some time, and they've grown. They're really prominent. People are always talking about them. They're always on the homepage of our intranet. There's different events and things you can get involved in. So I think that it's just part of our company culture. And you can actually be a part of two BRGs if you want to as well. And so I would say there's strong support for that time. Now, for me personally, as a leader, I think there's a lot different kind of like time and responsibility compared to being a member. When you join like 1 hour monthly meeting, you may have like a subcommittee that you're part of. And for me, this is a big part of what I do kind of every day, every week. And so I'm really fortunate that my leader and her leader, they've been super incredibly supportive of me, investing that time into the BRG and into the organization. So I've definitely seen that strong support. I do sometimes work on it outside of work hours too, because there's just so much work to do, but that's something I choose to do. I definitely don't have to. And I think a lot of the BRG leaders, like, they don't necessarily like have to work on stuff outside of work hours, but just because it's something I'm interested in and want to do, I find myself sometimes spending some time, but a lot of it is through the day, and there's some strong support to be a part of it.
Great, thank you guys. So we talk about all these amazing things that they offer, but I'm curious to see what maybe some of the bigger challenges are as you guys are involved, because it may be, like you were saying, Shannon, maybe a little bit outside of your normal responsibilities, but something you want to do. So what are some things that you guys have seen throughout the years of your involvement?
Yeah, I think one of our biggest challenges, and Sarah kind of touched on this a little bit, is, in a big company, you have people who are in all sorts of different job roles or hours that they work, or their ability to kind of be in front of a computer to join a Zoom meeting. So for us, we're a healthcare organization. We have a ton of nurses, doctors, people who are taking care of patients at the bedside. And so that looks really different for them compared to somebody who may work nights, let's say, for example, or weekend shift. So it's challenging, and we see higher engagement among our corporate team members just because of the nature of their work and their ability to join something. So we always record our meetings, make them available, and we make sure to send out volunteer opportunities. And so even if it's something where a person can't join, a monthly meeting at a certain time because of their work commitments, they can still help out in different ways. So that's definitely something we've seen. Like, for example, like we send out surveys to try to like we asked our BRG members, if they use accommodations and what that that experience was like for them. Like, we do a lot to try to like elevate the experiences of people in the BRG and share that feedback with leadership in kind of a safe way. So just because you can't join the monthly meetings, and some of them do, some of them it's kind of like depends on their schedule that week. So I would say that's probably like one of the biggest challenges that we've faced.
Yeah, Shannon, that is what I was going to say. So it's definitely a challenge across industries and across companies. We even have individuals who don't have email addresses. And so then it comes to like, well, then how do we send it to them? What does that look like? And for us, we're really taking the approach of bite-sized content that we can kind of like share to everybody at once. But that is definitely a challenge. The other challenge I would say is really a challenge for our leaders, and that is not comparing group to group. I think sometimes our leaders struggle with, they're so passionate about it and they're so excited, and they see how many members this group has versus this group, or the connections this group may have versus this group, and understanding the individuality of each group, and the fact that statistically, like, women's groups across companies are almost always the largest. And so I think that has been something that has been challenging because we really want people to feel motivated and to feel excited about what they're doing. But sometimes that excitement leads to this kind of like comparison, which is just a really hard place to be mentally. So I think a big challenge for me is just making sure that I'm supporting each individual person at an emotional level and understanding what do they want to get out of this, and also like what are some of their hiccups? Like, are they comparing membership numbers? Are they comparing what kind of community events they're having? Or are they measuring their success based on that individual group, and looking at what other companies are doing? For example, our ABLE group focused on disabilities, that is going to look super different than our women's group, and the amount of members they have and the activities they're doing are going to look really different. And maybe that's not as easy to measure in some instances. So I think a big challenge for me is just making sure that they feel supported and supporting them each as individuals rather than the group as a whole.
Those are some great points that you guys are making, and thank you so much for sharing that. We're gonna go into like probably one more question and then open it up to see if any of our guests have some questions for you guys. But if an organization is looking to start a group, what do you guys think would be your biggest piece of advice you'd want to share?
Yeah, I can start with this. I know from personal experience, the first thing I did was reach out to as many other DEI leaders as possible and ask them like, okay, what were some of the hiccups that you had in launching? How did you decide what you were going to launch? All that different stuff. And so that was the first thing. The second was making sure that we were looking at internal data to see what our representation looked like. So that way when we were forming the groups, we could form it based on representation we already have, and also strategically what kind of representation do we want to make sure that we're attracting and uplifting, and how can we assess that and help that with forming the group. So those are the two data pieces. And then I think the last thing that was really helpful that I would recommend is really bringing in your associate / employee population early into the process. So as you're building out, Shannon called it their like strategic plan. For us, we call it like a charter. As you're planning that out, bringing the associates in who identify and don't identify to be like, hey, what do you want this group to do? Like, let's make sure that we're lifting up and elevating the voices of the group that this represents, rather than coming in and making assumptions about what this group needs or may want. So I think doing the research, looking at data, and then making sure that we're elevating the voices of those traditionally marginalized identities, as opposed to coming in, maybe falling into that like savior mentality that can be really unhealthy for these groups.
Yeah, those are some great points, Sarah. And it's interesting even hearing like company, the differences, because I think at Novant Health, I think BRGs were created, but then new groups would join. And so I think the Persons with Disabilities BRG, like they kind of would wait until there were people who were interested in starting the group and who kind of like raised their hand and said, yes, like I want to lead this, or I want to be a part of starting this. And that kind of predated my time with the BRG. The BRG was around for a year or two before I joined it. And so I would say like one of the most important things is your executive sponsor. So for us, your executive sponsor is like your kind of senior leader in the organization who is partnering with you, advocating for you, helping when you may encounter like roadblocks. And so we are really fortunate to have an amazing executive sponsor. She's the senior vice president of she's our chief patient advocacy officer. And so it kind of naturally fits that this is part of her work because her team works with, people with disabilities and interpreter services and our ASL interpreters and things like that. So it's kind of like part of her job, but she herself is hearing impaired, and she's really like vocal about it. So having somebody, especially if you can get somebody higher up in your organization, because then it kind of creates an environment where people feel comfortable disclosing or identifying themselves as having a disability and feeling safe about joining a group. And she's just been really supportive and helpful. So that's kind of like one thing. Another thing is like that, because the the BRG and leading the BRG can take a lot of work. We try to have multiple leaders. So each BRG, we try to have like 2 leaders, like leader, co-leader, and then some of the BRGs, depending on the size. Like we also have a secretary who helps with our meeting minutes and notes and things like that. You may have some others have like, you know, especially like our women's and our Black African American BRG, they're so much bigger. So they have like different levels of leadership that we don't have. But just thinking about your structure. So it's like your who's kind of in your corner, your executive sponsor, who's helping lead the work. And then another thing is scope. There's so much that you can focus on. And I think that was something we kind of struggled with early on. And we've actually kind of changed our structure over time. Like, for example, mental health was like part of our BRG. And then that became such a big area of focus that it kind of spun off and became its own BRG. And so, you know, when you start, your structure, whatever it is, will be fine, but you'll grow, you'll change, you'll have that flexibility. But just thinking about like, what are you going to focus on? And that goes back to like the charter, your strategic plan, like what are the things that you're really going to work on? And that can really help from the beginning, I think. And then finding people who are really passionate about some of those different areas. And you don't want to have one person who's like so passionate about one thing, but they don't care about any of the other things. And so you'll find all of that, you'll navigate it, but just thinking about those things are helpful too at the beginning.
Great, thank you guys so much. So I think we're going to try opening it up to questions. If anyone has some questions, you guys can raise your hand and unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat. So feel free to ask our panelists anything that you'd like. While we're waiting, let's see, what type of activities do you want to explore that you have not?
Shannon, do you want to take this one first?
Sure. Yeah, I'm thinking because there's so much we're doing, but there's definitely opportunity to do more. I think that we have opportunity, to do more in the community space. And we're just starting to do more and more with like other community organizations. But so I think that's an area where I would like to see us do a bit more in those community partnerships. We just recently formed it's kind of almost like an external BRG. It's called a Community Voice Council. And so it's made up of different community organizations or some of our patients and family members who have disabilities. So I think that's going to be like a really rich place for us to explore and understand some of those opportunities to partner more closely in the community. So I think that's kind of one of the things that's next for us.
That is exciting. The community piece is big, and it's really exciting to kind of pull people together and helps create that sense of community for your BRG. So that's really cool. I would say for me, as somebody who's kind of overarching of all of them, is I would say an increased level of focus on intersectionality. And so intersectionality has to do with the different identities that kind of cross over the group. So for me, I identify as a woman, so I fall into that group, but I also have a disability. I'm dyslexic, and so I also fall into that group. So it'd be really cool if they partnered together and did something about statistically how women have a harder time being diagnosed with certain disabilities because they present different than research showed in males. And so different things like that, I think it'd be really cool for our groups. They do a lot, but I would love to see them partner together a little more often, because I think it kind of lightens some of the workload that they have. As Shannon said, sometimes she's doing things outside of work, and my goal is that our leaders wouldn't do that, but I know that that is definitely happening just based on the work that they're doing. It's incredible, and there's no way that they're getting all of that done in a 40-hour work week with their normal day job as well. So I would love to see them partner a little more and highlight the intersectionality while still balancing the fact that they do have different goals and objectives that surround each group. So making sure that we're highlighting the individuality, but also the intersectionality that occurs with all the different people. That was a great question. Thanks for asking.
That is a great question. And Sarah, when you're talking about intersectionality, it made me think about like our BRGs at Novant Health have recently started doing more of that, like having events together. And I've heard the leaders say that, like that it's great because you also have like a bigger pool of people who are coming to your events and who are more
Yes.
engaged. I think it makes the conversation more rich too, because you're right. We aren't just like one dimensional. We're people. We have lots of different dimensions and identities. And I think that, so I'm glad you brought that up. I think that's a really great point.
Great, thank you guys so much. Does anyone have any other questions for our panelists? One thing that comes to mind is I'd love to know how you guys are able to take what you guys learn from your BRGs and the meetings that you have and how that applies to then maybe your marketing strategy for the organization as a whole.
Yeah, I'm happy to start with that one. So it's kind of unique because my role like is marketing. So internal communication is basically like a lot of people call it like internal marketing, but my team, we're the people who write what's on the internet and our employee newsletters and things like that. So it kind of is, it's naturally part of my job. So kind of there was naturally already the ability to work on that and say, hey, we need to talk more about disability as a company. And so kind of have a foot in each of those worlds. But it's exciting because now marketing is getting more involved. Like, for example, this month for Disability Employment Awareness Month, we're doing a campaign on social media. So we're doing it on LinkedIn and Twitter and some of our other channels where we're sharing some of our team members who have a disability, sharing their experience and what that's been like, and just trying to share that, you know, this is a safe, supportive culture to bring your full self to work. So as part of kind of our recruitment strategy. So that's been one thing we've done. We also have, we've been just sharing, we have some really cool stories where people have shared, we have this one team member, she has autism and her son has autism. And she basically wrote this really great piece about what she wishes people knew about, you know, people with autism and some of her coworkers. And it just was so powerful, just opened up some of these conversations. And so we're starting to do a little bit more kind of externally, not just like internally having those conversations, but also having them, you know, and externally as well. So, and then another thing is that we have a digital accessibility group, which is basically looking at like, hey, is our app, is our website, are they friendly? Like no matter what, you know, your experience is, we want it to be accessible for everyone. And so marketing has been a part of that group, and they're doing a big project with our website to make it a better experience for people. So that was a lot, Sarah.
No, that was great. We're doing really similar things, especially the social media piece is huge for us. I think we've always done a great job marketing our products and services and what we offer customers, but we haven't always marketed who we are as a company and the culture and values behind that. So that has been really cool to be super intentional about that and to kind of elevate the voices of some of our BRG members. So we've been really intentional about that. And then the other thing that's pretty unique about MSC is a lot of our customer interactions are our field salespeople actually going into customer locations. And so they're interacting in person in these different facilities. And so really equipping them with what are we doing surrounding diversity, equity, and inclusion, because more and more people are valuing that. They want to work with diverse companies. They want companies to have diverse suppliers, so making sure that they understand that. But second is, I think the level of empathy and understanding that our associates are beginning to grasp as they're hearing these stories, as they're learning these statistics that then change who they are and how they enter into spaces. And so their ability to connect with people that are different than them in terms of our customers, their ability to not make assumptions and understand kind of what are your needs, the ability to ask more personal questions that maybe they wouldn't have normally asked because they were recently asked that question on a meeting. So I think how it's changing them as people also is changing how MSC is showing up to our customers and how we're caring for them well, not just in the business sense, but like, how was your weekend? Like, how are your kids doing? I remember you mentioning that, or like, hey, how's your family handling this situation that's going on in the world? And this like lack of fear to bring up external things that we can go beyond oh yeah, we have this product to offer, this service to offer, but like, hey, I care about you as another human, like as another individual, and I like want to make sure that you're doing well, because this relationship goes beyond us just selling you a product, but we're forming a relationship and connection here just as two people.
Thank you guys so much for your willingness to open up and share about your experiences and the groups. Does anyone have any other questions before we close out for the panel?
Hi, I had a question. Could you talk about maybe if your company provides financial support or some kind of budgeting for your BRGs to maybe hold events or bring in guest speakers or any of these things that you guys have talked about?
Yeah, I can start with this one. So each of our groups do have a budget, and half of it is just a budget for them. And the other half actually comes from our community relations team, because there's so much overlap. Community relations actually sets aside dollars for each group. So for example, like our Black Inclusion group gives scholarships to an HBCU in Charlotte, Johnson C. Smith. And so our community relations team knows that, budgets for that, and that way those donations and the community relation elements aren't coming out of the ERG's budget. So instead they can focus on if they want to supply a meal, if they want to bring in a keynote speaker, if they want to pay for some sort of recruiting event that they might want to go to. All of those different things are covered in that. So we keep it in one big pool, but have it divided up between them. And what's great is that if one group is like, hey, here's what we're projecting, like we're not going to use all of our budget. If another group is looking for just a little bit more, we kind of have the flexibility to switch that around, because the financial opportunities are different based on each group. So for example, there's a lot more added costs of highlighting something that might fall under our ABLE group with disabilities, because there's less fundraising than maybe something for the Black Inclusion group, because there is more kind of like around the country fundraising for that. Since the Black Lives Matter movement, there's a little more equity in terms of that cost. And so we want to make sure that we're being equitable in how we're splitting up funds.
Yeah, so at Novant Health, each BRG does have their own budget. And so those funds are really to kind of go back to your strategic plan, like in your goals for the year. And so we've used them in different ways. For example, like this year, part of our budget went to, there's like a mental health program that we're starting internally. And it's kind of like a train the trainer. So part of it went to kind of mental health training. We sent a couple of our leaders and members to the Disability In conference to participate in that, to kind of learn and hear from other companies in this space and what they're doing. We also used it to help put on events. So the event that I mentioned, like that's kind of like the simulation event that we're doing, to provide for some, just snacks for people who are taking time out of their workday to come and participate in that. So there's a lot of different ways that we use that funding. And then beyond kind of like the BRG budget, there's like the Office of Diversity Inclusion, like they pay for things like participating in the DEI survey, like things that are a bit more expensive and would be kind of beyond the scope of our BRG. And then community relations also does have budgets to support like sponsorships of different community walks or events and things. So it's kind of in a few different places, but we do have our own budget within the BRG that we're able to make decisions on how to spend that money.
Great, thank you guys again. Any last minute questions as we wrap up from anyone? All right, well, we really appreciate you guys taking your time and sharing your expertise with us. For all those students who are here, we do have more meetups throughout the week on NDEAM covering different topics. They're all in Higher and Niner. And we also are doing a poster contest for students. So I'm going to put the link in the chat if anyone is interested in looking at what that might look like. And we thank you guys for coming. Have a great day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.